public comment. So the first item on our agenda is to approve the agenda.
Motion
Motion by Lundgren, second by Moore. Any additions, corrections to the agenda? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well, we want to welcome the entirety of Pine County here. So I was actually expecting that we would have a pretty full house, but thanks for coming. I don't know, don't know if we have anybody connected?
I don't believe so from the public.
Well, they called in droves, just about like they did for the meeting this afternoon or this morning. Anyway, welcome. And thanks for those that did come. And our David, our administrator, is going to walk us through a bunch of slides that explain our budget and the process that we have to get to our budget. So, David.
All right, thank you. And as Steve said, my name is Dave Minke. I'm the county administrator. And Mr. Chair, if it's okay, since we have such a small audience, I mean, I think we can take questions during the presentation.
Yeah,
if there's a particular issue or something that comes up, just like raise your hand or get my attention, and we can try to address it at the time if that works for you. I'm already messing up. So we have 11 budgeted funds. If you've been following from year to year, you know that last year we only had 10. So we've added the COVID-19 relief fund as a budgeted fund because that is where the economic development coordinator is actually budgeted. And so you'll see some numbers pop up in some of the later slides on that one. But almost all of the activity that you think of as county services is accounted for in the first three funds: the general fund, the health and human services fund, and the highway fund. And so we'll spend most of the time talking about those funds. High level, what did we accomplish with the 2022 budget? All of the funds are structurally balanced, which means current year revenue plus planned use of reserves, the fund is balanced. The revenue estimates are realistic and we believe relatively conservative. This budget maintains service levels, but also increases service levels. And for, I think, commissioners who've been on for a while, typically we don't add that added service level. We have not done that for a while. So this budget is a little bit unique in that regard, that we have some specific increases. There's $100,000 increase for vehicle purchases. There's $75,000 for vehicle maintenance. There's a new sergeant in the sheriff's office. There's a social worker or nurse position that's been added. There's an eligibility worker that's been added. The economic development coordinator has been added. There's a property appraiser that's been added. And we have a hire ahead policy for the deputies because of the labor market and the difficulty of filling those positions in an effort to keep vacancies to a minimum. We've continued with the dedicated funds for vehicle replacement. And then the building and technology funds, we have previously funded those at $75,000 for 2021 and 2022. Those have been decreased to $25,000, but they are still budgeted as a separate dedicated fund. And then we added the election equipment fund a couple of years ago. We completed the transition out of the old courthouse, and long-term, we know that's going to lead to savings because we're not going to have to pay for roof repairs and tuck pointing and HVAC boilers, et cetera. So that should be long-term savings. And then in 2021 and 2022, we are receiving American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so that is giving us some flexibility in budgeting and helping our bottom line. Well, we collect the property tax, which is what we'll talk about in a little bit. But in the budget, we have a lot of non-property tax revenue. And in the general fund, these are the top non-property tax revenues. So county program aid is the biggest one, the police contracts, payment in lieu of taxes, the tax forfeited land and timber sales, police aid, the solid waste fee, that's that fee on per parcel, that's $10 per parcel. Penalties and interest, probation aid, that is the state's commitment to fund probation, where this year they're at about 28% when the statute says 50. And so we've had a lot of conversation with our legislators on that. The assessor contracts and then recorded fees. So those are the big non-levy revenue sources. 80% of our expenditures are covered on this page. So when you think about trying to balance a budget or trying to reduce a budget, the high cost items are salaries and benefits. And so year to year, they're going up about 4% or just over $1 million. Road and bridge construction is $9.2 million. We have some debt service payments that we're making. In the out-of-home placements, we're decreasing that $178,000, but it's still nearly $1.5 million in out-of-home placement costs. And then the vehicles and equipment, and the equipment is things like motor graders and dump trucks, medical service to prisoners, and then the library appropriation. So those together are 80% of the general fund. This runs through each fund with the revenues and the expenditures. And then if you look at the net, you can see the general fund is at a negative $220,000. And so that is going to be made up with use of reserves. And in this case, about 100,000 of it is unspent salaries that are carrying forward from 2021 to 22 in the court security. And then there's $100,000 of fund balance that we're planning to spend on vehicles and equipment. Health and Human Services has some targeted fund balance spending as well. And then in the COVID-19 relief, that $115,000, those are the costs related to the Economic Development Coordinator position. We haven't budgeted a revenue for that. We know that we are going to receive about $2.8 million in 2022 that will go into there. And then we have designated already some of that for projects like earlier today when we had extension with their request. And so we'll continue to work through that through the ARPA funding. So the bottom, that $50,644,606, that is the total expenditures of the county proposed for 2022. This slide just takes basically that same information and puts it into a pie graph. So you can see highway is 30%, health and human services is 24%. That general fund shows 39%. 2/3 of that general fund spending is public safety. And so about a quarter of all county spending is public safety, sheriff, courts, jail, attorney's office, probation. And then we have lesser amounts for debt, land management, and the designated funds aren't even enough to get to 1%. This chart just compares 2021 to 2022, so you can see where the changes are. I'll just leave that up for a minute for you to look at it. The total increase is about almost $3.9 million. And you can see that 2.9 or almost $3 million is highway projects, which is primarily state aid funded projects. This chart answers the question, where is the increase in the levy going? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the top 3 items, and then I'm not going to address each of the line items, so if you have questions, certainly let me know. But in IT, you see that there's $147,000 of new levy. Interesting on this one is it's not new spending, it's a shift where those expenses were previously paid from the recorder's funds. Because of the tax and CAMA system that we're buying, we're going to use the recorder funds for that. So we had to find a new source for some of the IT spending, and so that's coming out of levy. In the jail, there's $138,000 of new levy. Most of that is being driven by a decrease in revenue for prisoner boarding. So it's not new spending, it's we're not getting the external revenue that we had budgeted for 2021. And so to make up that gap, we're having to increase the levy. And then in the sheriff's office, you can see that the 137,000 new levy is almost exactly the increase in salary and benefits costs. So all of that new levy is being driven primarily by that new sergeant position being added to the budget. And so I just wanted to dwell on those three a little bit to show that the numbers tell a story, but each story might be a little different. And this slide just shows the same concept, but these departments are seeing a decrease in levy and or a decrease in salary and benefits. And on some of them, like dispatch and veteran services, the decrease is not caused because of cuts to staffing. It's caused by turnover, that newer employees are just being paid less than the long-term employees who have left. And so it's not a change in staffing level. It's just the less expensive employees. And then HHS, you can see the levy is going down $80,000 while the expenses are going up quite a bit. And so that's a function of non-levy revenue being able to pay for those. This slide is an overview of the general fund. So total expenditures from 21 to 22 increased $666,000 or 3.5%. We're using $221,000 of reserves, and the levy portion is $12 million, which is, so the levy is paying for 60% of the general fund. That's up 1%. In 2021, the levy paid for 59% of the general fund. These are all the departments in the general fund, just to give a graphic representation of where the money is going. And so you can see sheriff's operation, jail, attorney, probation, all of that is what really drives the public safety costs. The next slide is going to be very similar to this, but where you see that $500,000 mark on this, the lowest line on this graph, the next graph is going to start at 400,000. So it's all, these are much lower cost departments. And then we just have a few workload measures for some of the activity that these various departments do. And the bottom line on this chart, marriage licenses, just anecdotally in 2020, we presume that was like the COVID slowdown where people couldn't have wedding ceremonies. And so marriage licenses decreased somewhat. But you can see the documents recorded is increasing, which shows a lot of real estate activity. The zoning and auditor treasurer office, again, just some workload measures over time.
Interesting. Oh, I don't have 2021. The deaths.
Yeah.
Population.
And the very last line on this side is the absentee and mail ballot count, which we all knew, back when the election was going on, that those numbers were very high. In this chart just reinforces the increase. And then the last note here, the county auditor treasurer's office collects almost $50 million in property taxes and distributes that to 64 taxing authorities. So that's a lot of work on the back end to do all those calculations and prepare all those statements. Jail operations, this is a kind of an interesting chart where you can really see the COVID impact. And the numbers are of course down, and about in the middle of the slide where it says average daily population is down to 45.7. If you look back to 2017, 2018, it was in the 80s and 90s. And then when you go down a couple of lines and you see that cost per inmate per day, the fixed costs are pretty constant at the jail. And so if you have half as many prisoners, your cost per day is going to go up or is going to double. And so you can see that how the impact of those numbers is on the jail. This chart also highlights that the STS program, Sentence to Serve, was eliminated in 2021. And the court security, we have not filled those positions because court has not been in session. And so we've had some salary savings and we're able to roll those forward into 2022. Health and Human Services, total expenditures are going up $150,000. We're using some reserves. HHS has some designated reserves for programs like MIC-V, the home visiting program and such. So it's expected that those reserves are used. The levy portion decreases a little bit from 34% to 32%. This breaks down Health and Human Services into its three main functional areas: income maintenance, social services, and public health. And you can see the increases and decreases from 21 to 22, and then the amount of levy that goes into each of those areas. Again, some workload measures from public health. There's child protection reports. And we know Becky has talked before about the impact of COVID on reducing the number of reports. Kids are in school less. There's educators are focused on a lot of other things responding to COVID. And so they're maybe not seeing the kids as often or as, you know, in close proximity. So they're maybe not finding potential items that could be reported. This is a new slide, just starting to add another workload measure on welfare, child welfare referrals and parent support outreach referrals. Highway, you can see this is highway typically operates on a 2-year cycle where they'll go up quite a bit one year because of projects, and then next year they'll fall back down a little bit. 2022 is going to be a big year for highway. And then you can see the local sales and use taxes in there at 1.2 million. The levy portion is down quite a bit on this budget. The dollar amount for the levy is fairly constant, but the percent goes down because of all the state aid that's going into highway next year. The debt we have 3 bonds that are outstanding. And that 2031 doesn't seem so far away anymore.
No, it doesn't.
That's gonna give you a quick.
You can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Fund balances, just a snapshot as of the end of last year, how much money was in reserve in the general fund. It was $6.8 million. 5 of that was unassigned. The county board policy is to have 20 to 35% of funds in undesignated reserves. And so we're at 26%. So not at the top end of the range that the county policy says, but certainly it's improved over the last decade.
Where does the state want us there?
The state auditor typically says about 50%. Health and Human Services, they have just about $3 million in fund balance, and then highway just over $500,000, and land at about 1.4 million. So this is the property tax levy by fund, showing the change from 2021 to 2022. And this is where you can see Health and Human Services is down that 80,000. That $75,000 increase in highway is the $75,000 for vehicle maintenance.
Kind of unfair to highway.
What's that?
It's kind of unfair to highway because they've taken on a responsibility and then we haven't funded it at a very good level for them. So we're trying to make up.
So this is the simplest representation of how your property taxes are calculated. So you take the property value times the class rate, and there are 61 different class rates. So the county assessor has to assign one of those. And for a single family home, the class rate is 1%. And so if your home is 200, or I'll use the example because I want to make sure I do the arithmetic correctly. If your home is valued at $100,000, you take that times the class rate of 1%, your tax capacity is $1,000. You do that for every property in the county and you add that all up and you get $34,332,390. And then you divide the levy into that and you get a tax classification rate of 60.2%. And so that $100,000 home would pay $602 in property tax to the county. Steve, you almost look like you wanted to say something.
No, I'm glad you explained that. Every year it's so easy, but it's so complicated because I looked over at Kelly when you said 61 class of property. And I think when I started on the board, there were 56 classes of property. And we've been working on legislators to make less classes of property, so it was less confusing to people. And now we had, a few years later, we got 5 more classes of property. So it's.
Did our rate go down?
Our tax rate, yes, it went down.
So for 2021, it was about 62%. And so we are just over 60% on the tax classification rate.
I guess, does it, oh, I'm sorry. Well, you go first.
Well, so like we've been talking, the class rate went down. So if your valuation stayed the same, essentially, your taxes would have went down this year.
Yeah, and I'm guessing few people's.
Well, commercial and vacant land, that happened.
Okay.
But anywhere there's a
The
house.
valuation went down?
The valuation stayed the same or did not increase very much. So those taxes stayed the same or went down for the most part.
Yeah.
But if there's a house, it went up for sure. And I think Dave's next slide will.
Yes,
paint that picture.
it will. And I was thinking, oh, JJ.
JJ's got a question.
And then, no, isn't it with commercial? It's let's just say a percent up to a certain value, then after that value, your percentage change. But that's for commercial, right?
Well, it's for a lot of things. So like, as Dave said, residential house has 1%. Here's me going, well, up to $500,000, because once you're over 500,000, then it's 1.25%. And so there's iterations of that for pretty much every tax classification.
Okay.
So commercial, yes, the breaks at 150,000, then you go to the higher rate.
I knew that with commercial, but I guess no, I didn't know they do that for residential.
Actually, that's an interesting question, JJ, because what started right here in East Central Minnesota with Don Nemi, a county commissioner from Aiken County, with the exemption for commercial property of
The state general tax.
state general tax.
Mhm.
So if your commercial property is less than 150,000, you don't have to pay that state general tax. Because we think we get beat up for it.
Mhm.
We don't get a nickel of it.
Yeah.
We just collect it. It's one of those 64 things that Kelly has to send a check to.
But now that's not what you're talking about. That's a
Yeah.
whole separate thing, right?
That's-
Right, that's a whole separate
Yeah.
tax on top of the regular property tax, the state general tax, which commercial properties and seasonal properties pay.
And we noticed it the first year, I think it was $1,000 on ours.
Right.
It went down. Now it's creeping back up. But they're not that, I mean, everything valuation.
Just for a point of reference, I believe the next state that has classifications of property that's close to Minnesota has 15 classes of property.
I remember when I started, it was homestead, non-homestead, agricultural, homestead, agricultural, non-homestead, commercial, and seasonal. So I think we had 5 or 6.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
So
I've been here a long time.
what, I mean, obviously, so like when you're talking on residential, up to a certain amount is 1, and then that's part of the 62. So like residential could potentially have how many different ones?
Right, well, and residential has so many different iterations as well, because you have residential homestead and residential non-homestead, and so it just keeps going.
So where would be a sweet spot? Like you said, 15? I mean,
I don't know, there's been property tax working groups that have come out with recommendations of combining all of these classes into one, and then somebody finds a problem with it, and then it goes by the wayside. It'd be sure great if we could get back to that.
You know, the homestead tax, as valuations go up, homestead goes down. So.
And
once
it
you get
completely
over-
goes away at 413,000,
Once your home is valued over
$13,000.
$13,000, then you get no homestead credit. But, you know,
They did not stick with keep it simple, stupid. You know?
No, but if anyone, I feel like I have to speak in
Yeah.
defense of the number 61. All of those were implemented because somebody thought it would be more fair.
right,
And so you try to slice and dice, well, we'll make a carve out for this and a carve out for that and a special case for that, so that everybody is fair. If you reduce that number, some people are not going to be happy and other people will.
Right,
So.
yeah.
I
so
mean, I think, I don't think there's anybody that is mad because 100% disabled vet doesn't have to pay taxes on their place.
Up to $300,000.
$300,000 place. The thing that, you know, the state legislature makes that rule. But guess who pays for it? The county where the home is. So, you know, should they send some money along when they make those rules? I say, yes, they should, especially when they got
That's what the local program aid is supposed to help offset.
right. But
So now these 350,000, 500,000, 150,000, do they ever change? Or-
They have not changed much. The only one that changes annually is the agricultural tier system. There's a whole calculation and statute of how they change that every year based on certain indexes. But
the
and we-
ag homestead one or the,
the tier classification for ag homesteads, you only get the 0.5% on the ag land up to like 1.986 million this year. But next year it might be 1.899 million. And then it goes to 1% once you get over that value. We only have a handful of taxpayers though that end up in that other ag situation. And I do want to clarify, like if you have a house that's $550,000, you get the 1% on the first 500,000, and then it's just the last 50,000 that gets the higher rate. So it's not just that the
Not the
whole
whole,
thing
yeah.
goes.
okay.
Yeah, and that was the same with commercial then also, right?
Right, that's
Yeah,
the
it's
same
the
with
first-
commercial. The first 150,000 is at the lower rate. It's called the preferential rate.
That's right. Yeah.
Helps the small business.
But as we know, that's pretty unrealistic. Some of them numbers are getting pretty unrealistic where,
Well, and like the homestead benefit, for example, the homestead benefit increases up to a value of $76,000. Well, that number 76,000, I don't know, Terry, you maybe remember when it came in, but it's at least the early 90s. So that number the calculation hasn't been updated. There's not very many $76,000 houses. So maybe that's something that could be looked at of that homestead benefit top, move somewhere more
Yeah.
realistic.
Hasn't adjusted with the times.
Right, it has not adjusted with the times.
But they've talked about taking it away. So it's
Mhm.
kind of one of those things, you know, are you
Yeah.
are you
Right.
pleased to have it or do you want it to just, you know, Wisconsin doesn't have it. Do we want it to? So, yeah.
Yeah, and as valuations go up, it should.
Right.
And this is where I also feel like I need to mention. that We're looking at a new tax and CAMA system. Part of the reason that is so hard is it's the software that has to be able to make all of these distinctions and calculations.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's gotta be right.
Yes.
It can't be, whoops.
I'll move on to this slide, and Kelly, why don't you stay there because you can more competently talk about that negative number up there. But I want to start on the bottom left of this slide, and that $3,548,333 number. That is the total value of property in Pine County. To me, that is a huge number, right? When you think about it, a billion is a big number. So 3.5 billion in property value in Pine County. And then as you go up the slide, it looks at the value by major classification, and then on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is the tax capacity. And it shows the change in tax capacity from 2021 to 2022. And this is where you see the commercial industrial decreasing somewhat. And part of that is attributed to the change in the power line way that is handled. And Kelly, maybe you can just say that.
Sure, thanks, Dave. So previously, the power lines throughout the whole county, they were taxed as personal property. And so they were included within, and this is only the distribution power lines. So they were included in our tax capacity calculations. So whatever city or township those lines ran through, it was part of that city and township's tax capacity. However, 2 years ago, the Department of Revenue read the statute a little bit closer and said, our directions to you have been wrong. They should not be included in that calculation. They should be included in what's called the county-wide average rate calculation, which is not part of the tax capacity. So that's why on this slide, you see the commercial, because those power lines are still included in that commercial valuation. However, they're not included anymore in that tax capacity calculations. We as a county will actually get more taxes off of the power lines with them being taxed this way. However, because they're not taxed to a specific city or township, the city and township loses out. And so this fall I had met with a couple of them. The city of Bruno was hit especially hard. It was 33% of their tax base left because of that change. And it's what the statute said all along. It's just that nobody had read it close enough. I mean, we've got the directives from the Department of Revenue of telling us to do it the old way. And then someone read it and said, uh-oh, that wasn't what was supposed to be happening.
So that completes my presentation.
Do we have a chart, David, that shows the percentage that this total levy gets from ag and from residential and from?
We could just do the division for each of those.
So
Not immediately.
Just, I only asked that because I was at one of those workshops and there are counties in the state, in the southwest part of the state where over 80% of their tax income comes from ag land. Well, as ag land in that part of the country has just absolutely ballooned, it's changed their dynamics terribly.
So just looking at this, right, and man, I struggle with arithmetic.
Yeah,
But 15 million is less than half of 34 million, right? So
Yep.
residential is the largest, but it's something less than half.
Yep.
Ag is about a quarter. Seasonal would be something less than a quarter.
Yep.
And I'm guessing there are people in the room who are doing better arithmetic than I am, but
I was pretty impressed with how you were doing there.
Yeah, you're doing good.
40.
What about the natural gas pipeline that goes all the way through the county? What does that generate?
So that is taxed as part of the tax capacity in the commercial industrial.
And they didn't have any issues with, like Cass County did on their pipeline?
With the valuation stuff.
Yes.
So ours has been pretty quiet.
What's coming at us? maybe,
Well,
though?
so, but like 2 board meetings ago, you guys did approve one for Northern Natural Gas and a tax court abatement. And so as of right now, we have no open tax court petitions with utility companies.
Is that the long one? Is that the natural gas one?
Right.
so the county board will consider the final budget and levy at the December 21st regular county board meeting. Are there questions?
Anybody here? Anybody out there?
Voice my opinion now.
Yep,
I'm concerned.
yep.
I have rental properties that have people that are on assistance from. That's 11%. Well, I got one, there's 10. The others start going all the way up to 47% increase over last year. 47% increase is a house that I've been working on for 4 years, has not been inhabitable. And I keep telling them, we're putting siding on, nice siding. It was a park trailer house, part house. We pretty much rebuilt it, so it's all studded walls, insulated, but it takes time. It's kind of, I'm a only contractor too, kind of semi-retired, but it's across the street from me, so I work on it when I can and when I got money to do it. But that's one of the, that's what really threw me away. And that these rentals that are old and they need work. And I don't know what to tell my customers, because it's gonna probably put them
Get in this program.
their license. They're on fixed their social security.
Can I ask you a question? Have you talked to the assessor and had them come out and relook at the property to make sure that the value is okay?
Well, the one at 47%, Molly and I have been going back and forth. She left a note. Nothing had changed from the year before. Still a big hole open on one side of the house. And, I thought, everything would stay the same, but obviously it didn't. Now she says I can't do anything until next year. Big concern for me. I mean, I can read off all these properties where they are and the increases I had. I don't know what the average, do you guys know what the average increase for residential properties were across the board?
I do not. So you could see up there, the different property tax classifications. And so while residential went up like 11% or whatever it was, because those other classifications didn't go up as much, then that shifts the tax burden over to those residences. So values went up 10% on a lot of houses. Yeah, the taxes went up more than that because they're getting more of the tax responsibility because their values are going up when other values were staying the same. Now for 2023, we're seeing that land values have kind of north of here have gone crazy. And so it's going to be interesting because in 2023, some of that is going to start to shift back over off the houses.
Kelly, is this helpful to try to?
I don't know.
How does rentals, is that commercial?
Nope. So it's just residential, non-homestead, as long as it's one unit.
I should have known that. Thanks.
47%, yeah, seems that's big. But, or can you share the dollar amount that actually
Okay.
turns into? I'm curious as to.
Yeah, let's see, that's. I've invested very heavily into this. For all, I left the places that I was working, I bought properties, and like I said, I love to build. I was a salesperson for 35 years, but I also have a background in carpentry. Okay, these are. Is the one is the value of the property last year was valued at 85,200. It went up to 133,000. Could have brought the history of this. Could have been destroyed if I would have known it. I bulldozer it down, left it as lane. Got it ready. But anyway, my accountant could prove that there's been no income on it, that it's not livable. Next property is one of the Rapo people are just got a big rent help from the county. There's one up 18.8%. Value started at 136,000. It's now 171,000.
The one that you said, the first one, that would have been the 47% increase one though, right?
So how much are the taxes
Yeah,
to
we
the
did.
county on that?
The taxes are
To the county or all total?
will be total amount will be 12,064. Yeah, it used to be 1,000. Well,
It was 1,200 or
It
12?
went up to
1,264.
it was 1,012. It's 1,264. 1,264.
Can I see one of those?
Yeah, how much goes to the county?
I just want to see the county line.
Well, the one thing that I learned in all of my years of working here is that if you communicate with the assessor and have them come out and go through things and really watch when you get your valuation notices, it will save you major headaches.
Sure.
So, you missed that year and Molly thought that things were done, it
But I've
sounds
been
like.
arguing with her over the last 3 years, and it just keeps on going and going.
Yeah.
So I said, I don't know what to do.
My kid worked 40 acres from my.
Some things jump just because the valuations are jumping and they have to do.
Looked at
it
it
by
and it
statute.
went up
They have to increase it by
57%.
statute.
But it's not livable.
But it was
I mean,
taxes a year before were $30 or something.
need one 'cause there's no
Cause the
inspector.
homestead.
I'm a licensed contractor, I can't let somebody move into it until it's done, ready.
Or even less.
And I was gonna say, so if you watch those valuation notices in the spring, in June, they have a meeting just like this for you to come appeal your value to them.
Right.
So,
That's when we can't change it now, no matter what,
Yeah, I understand.
but in the spring, we can.
But you have to go to your local district first.
You gotta go to your township first,
Your
if it's in a
township.
township. And then,
and those meeting dates and places are
Then you
all
can
listed on
come
those
here.
notices.
and we listen, we're good listeners.
Good.
Yeah,
And if you can't make it to your township or city in person, you can always write a letter. Just so that you're on record.
Right, and a lot of times too, we have people that can't make it, and so we know that as staff, and so we just get them on record so that it doesn't close your opportunity.
But when you get that valuation notice, then have Molly come out and look, or whoever the assessor is for that area, and see. And if you and Molly are having personality difficulties, you can get a different one to come out there. If you don't think that she's being fair, which sometimes, you come to a standstill and you can get some fresh eyes, just ask for.
Right. Usually everything, I've always been able to work things out with people and stuff. And and Molly's helped me on different things. It's just that this guy, she just kept thinking it's going to be done. It's going to be done. You know, why, ooh, I'm losing money. I mean, that's a bad deal for me. Rental house that doesn't have income for 4 years is not a good way to run business.
Mr. Chair, I have something.
Yep.
And then there was a gentleman up in, I live up in Sturgeon Lake, and a tornado had come through years past. It made his house inhabitable. And Pine County actually,
We do a local option
Yeah, right.
disaster abatement.
right, recognize
Right.
that. Is there the same thing if it's not your primary homestead, like for this gentleman, if he can show that it's been uninhabitable, like he said, if he can provide documents and the income, I'm sure you could look at it and see if there's a hole in it. You're not.
Yeah, so the local option disaster is literally only for disasters, fire,
Okay.
weather, that type of thing.
Is it caused by that?
Start of this flood
Oh,
about 10 years ago.
I don't know where you're at though, but yeah.
Up
okay.
north,
No, this is over on Edgewater. They got serious runoff problems because all the building that's going on and stuff along the roads, but the culvert, which has this property on it, is a small culvert, needs to be redone. They only have that planned yet, I don't think. Anyway, it couldn't hold the capacity of the water. Water got so high, it was one of these 6 inches of water was running everywhere. A lot of people had problems there. It collapsed my whole foundation on one side, so I had to redo that. That was kind of the start of it. People were living in there at that time. Had to put them in a hotel for a while. So I didn't.
Oh, right. Hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I get going and you gotta have the money to knock stuff down and redo it and rebuild it, so. Again, I was just here to get information and to find out, you know, the average. There's an average increase across the board on these properties going. I have heard other, well, I talked to people, I'm surprised I'm the only one here, it seems like. That's really concerning, maybe other people have just given up. But I know I used to live in Mendota Heights and every once in a while we had to do the same thing.
We appreciate your input.
Yeah.
It's always great
It's,
to
uh,
hear back, yeah.
It's always a hard deal in a rising market because we follow the market when they assess.
Follow when it goes down.
yes,
do.
yes.
But that's really the hardest on people.
When they're
When
always a
they
year
see
behind.
their $350,000 house. Now the tax statement says it's worth 200,000. And they still owe 325 on it. It makes people cry.
I'm also licensed.
Yeah.
You know, I know what's going on. But again, there's a lot of things that cause, there's a change in the world. This people moving out and being able to work from home. A lot of commercial real estate, office buildings are going to be sitting there right now. So there's a lot of need. Again, I'm just trying to look after my renters have been there.
You have to, yeah.
Well, appreciate you coming.
Family, so, you know, it's gonna hurt them when I stay here. You're gonna increase, everything's gonna increase, because not only your taxes, as soon as the values go up, you know, what else follows it? The insurances, because the property is worth more. And, you know, you just pass it on. It's crazy, but you know, I guess that's kind of our life. We have to deal with too, so. Anyway. So you're telling me my best option is just to go with the flow and.
Oh, June.
Yeah, I think they said the spring of the year, right? Terry would be.
Yep.
Yeah, you're gonna want to go to your local board of review. But before that, when you get your valuation notice and your tax statement, they're gonna come out in April. Called
End of March, Terry.
the end of March.
You lost it already.
Boy. So the end of March, when you get that, you know, verify, check your values, see where you're at. And if you don't agree with it, then call the assessor's office and make an appointment and have somebody come out and look at it and review it. And they'll go inside and go through everything with you, which it's a huge benefit. And then if they feel that they can reduce it at that time, they will. And then it'll go to the local board and they'll make that determination. And then if you still don't agree with that, then you'll come here in June and then we'll hear you then. But you've got to follow that process because it's statute. You know, we can't change that.
Somebody with a background on that.
Yeah. Says what the value is, doesn't sell it, but my tax, what's gonna happen with my tax? That's the
They
bottom
can't.
line is what I'm concerned with. I don't care what the value of the house is, it's the bottom line.
But they can't tell you your
That's where
tax.
this, you know, the percentage is way off of, I think of what's going on. you know?
So right now, what they're working on is your 2022 valuation, which is going to be payable in 2023. So we really can't tell you what the tax is going to be on that value because your taxes are always a year after that valuation.
This green sheet that I got, valuation notice for 2022. What's that mean? Is that for my
So-
2023?
Nope, that one was, you got that this
In June.
spring.
Yeah.
And that
March.
was for that matches the value on there will match what's on your proposed statement.
Right.
So they valued you as of
But there's no
January.
numbers of what the taxes
No, because we
Yes.
wouldn't be able to, the levies and things aren't set yet at that point.
Oh.
So they
That's what
valued
I'm-
you as of
that's what I'm
January
saying.
2nd of 2022. But you don't pay taxes on that until 2023. And so there's no way to tell you what the school district's gonna need or the township or cities are gonna need for their levies or the county. Nobody knows what they're gonna need to, to be able to pay the bills for that time until closer to 2023. So it's hard because you get your valuation this year and you pay taxes on it the following year, which is confusing too.
Sure.
Minnesota's property tax system,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, well,
great.
hard place to retire.
Yep.
Or a good place.
I better.
Yeah.
So, any other questions from the board?
Look good, Dave.
Huh?
I said it looked good.
All right. We will declare the meeting adjourned.
Kelly,
Thank you, David.
I have something to tell you. So